And hello, good afternoon, happy Monday to everyone out there. Welcome to our weekly live show. Should you take that case? Welcome, all family and friends and members of our LinkedIn group, Attorney Medical Records Resource Group. And the point of should you take that case is to have a weekly show where we get together with other legal professionals, those that advocate for the injured, to get to know one another, gain from our experiences, things that will help us to learn how to manage those medical cases that come up in your personal injury, malpractice, or civil litigations. And I am Lisa, Lisa Wade, legal nurse consultant and owner of Wade Nurse Consultants, creator of our LinkedIn community, Attorney Medical Records Resource Group. And our guest today is supposed to be James Swiger from Virginia, but some technical difficulties have come up, and James is not quite with us yet. But hopefully, my plan is that James, if you're listening out there, if you could just give me a plain old telephone call, hopefully I can get you right in on this show to ask the questions and talk and get to learn about you a little bit more. And I think James is here. Hold on. James Swiger, is that you?
It is. And for some reason, I'm technological moron this afternoon.
Whoa!
It just won't. I downloaded Chrome like 5 times. It still won't open.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that is a problem. But we are on right now, James. And what I'm going to do is I'm still going to introduce you, and I think we can continue just a little bit different than we planned. How's that? We're flexible, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Certainly learn to be
flexible. Definitely. Thank you for your patience. And what I do on our weekly show is I am going to introduce you, but first we're going to talk to the people that have been so gracious enough to come by and attend our little festivity today. I invited, so just hang on. I'll get right back with you, James Swiger. Hang on. I just wanted to say welcome to everybody that's come to see us today. First, I'd like everybody that is to put an A in the chat if you're an attorney or if you're part of our Attorney Medical Records Resource Group, just so I can see you and say hello. Also, if you are a part of Women Owned Law, which is also an organization that I am a part of. We just had our symposium last week. You could put a W in that chat so we can see you and say hello. And if you are an entrepreneur in any field or realm that I invited to come along today, please put an E in that comment box so we can see you and say hello. Hold on, wait a second. Let's see if we are going to have. I'm just checking. Are you trying to get in,
James? I was trying my iPad that time, but it won't do it either.
Oh, okay. All right. Just checking. All righty. So back to our viewers. If you are an attorney, if you're part of Women Owned Law, if you're an entrepreneur like I know you are, Erica Burnett. Hello, thanks for coming. You can just put an A, a W, an E in that chat, or if you're all three of those things, put an AWE for awesome, because if you are all of those things, you are definitely awesome. Thanks for coming. So since James is with us by phone, let's see. Can we check and see if anybody has any comments about if we can hear James through our phone connections, how that sounds? Erica or
Can you all hear me?
Amos, can you hear us? Put a yes in the chat if you can hear James.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You sound good.
Okay. I was just saying it, so see if they can. And please call me Jim.
Oh, Jim, please. Well, thank you, Jim. I'm so glad to have you here today. So let me introduce you formally, Jim.
Sure.
All righty. And Jim or James Swiger or Swiger. I'm so sorry, Swiger.
That's all right.
And I practiced that too, and it came out the opposite. All right. But here's James. Mr. Swiger began his legal career after graduating from George Mason University, Antonin Scalia Law School with a Juris Doctor degree with distinction in 1981. He attended Villanova University and earned a BA in history in 1978. Go Villanova. Go Wildcats.
Go Wildcats.
Yeah, go Wildcats. And following his legal education, Mr. Swiger worked as a law clerk to the United States District Court in Richmond, Virginia. Thereafter, he entered private practice and has primarily represented injured workers in workers' compensation cases before the Virginia Workers' Compensation Commission, the Court of Appeals of Virginia, and the Supreme Court of Virginia. He has consistently received an AV preeminent rating from Martindale-Hubbell. He has been named a Best Lawyer in America from 2005 to the present. He has also been named a Virginia Super Lawyer in the area of workers' compensation law. In 2019, he was named a fellow by the College of Workers' Compensation Lawyers. And now I give to you Jim Swiger. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming and dealing with things under unusual circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah, I apologize for my technical ineptness. But
I would be apologizing a lot more, so that won't be necessary, Jim.
All right.
Well, I'm so glad you're here today to talk to us, to share with us a little bit more about you and how you work for your injured clients.
Sure.
Definitely. But before we do that, I definitely want to hear a little bit more about your journey and your path to becoming an attorney, the attorney you are.
Well, I credit a large, if not most of my success to the fact that I was a football player. So I started playing football in the 6th grade. I had the great privilege of playing for a legendary high school football coach at Archbishop Carroll High School in Washington, D.C., and thereafter played football, Division I college football at Villanova University on a full athletic scholarship. So I sort of grew up with a competitive nature, and certainly I fed off that competition and such. I actually went to college primarily because I wanted to play college football. I was a carpenter for many years during summers. I didn't miss any time. I went straight through school. But I worked as a carpenter and sort of planned on going into the carpentry business like my older brother. Went to Villanova, played football, realized while I was a pretty good college player, I certainly wasn't going to excel or make it even into the NFL. And during the course of my college career, I started dating a young lady whose father was a big-name trial attorney in New York. And I went up to watch him try some cases. And he's the one that convinced me that practicing law and playing football are very similar. They're based primarily not necessarily on your athletic ability alone. Obviously, you have to have some degree, but rather on the effort that you put in preparation and the competitiveness and the willingness to compete and the willingness to lose if necessary. Obviously, you can't be a trial lawyer if losing is something that you can't deal with. And same with an athlete. It's not getting knocked down, it's whether you get back up. So those were life lessons that taught me that was something I wanted to do. So like many others, I simply sat down and took the LSATs without much preparation, got a good enough grade to get in. I went to George Mason University Law School, which was a fledgling school at the time, because it's very close to my home, and I was able to live at my house with my parents during my first year as a matter of economics. My second year, I moved into Virginia. I grew up in suburban Maryland. I moved into Virginia, and I've resided in Virginia since 1979. I had the great privilege of clerking for a very distinguished U.S. District Court judge in Richmond, who passed away regrettably. But that is like a plum of a job if you want to be a trial lawyer, is clerking for a U.S. District Court judge. And I clerked for him for 18 months. I was admitted to the bar. When I took the bar, since I went to a Virginia law school, I was able to take the bar while I was still in law school. I took it in February of my third year. So fortunately, I passed it. And when I graduated on June 1st, I was sworn into the bar on June 4th. So I was actually admitted to the bar just a few days after graduation, because I'd already taken and passed the Virginia bar. And I clerked for the Honorable D. Dorch Warner, U.S. District Court judge, for 18 months, because my successor had to sit for the July bar and then wait for his results. So because I was the last class that they allowed you to take the Virginia bar if you went to a Virginia law school before you graduated. So after that, I developed an affinity for construction working and those that are injured on the job. And I started representing injured people. I went to work for a very large firm that specialized in Virginia workers' compensation, which is what my specialty is. And just so everybody knows, even in Virginia, there are several different workers' compensation laws that govern different people. For example, postal workers and federal workers have their own system, as do longshore workers, such as down at the Newport News shipyards. Excuse me, those are completely separate statutory schemes. The individuals I represent are covered under the Virginia workers' compensation law that covers the vast majority of workers in all walks of life. And I represent people in all walks of life, whether it's an orthopedic surgeon, and I've represented a number of them, or it's a Joe construction worker. About 50% of my clients are firefighters. Firefighters have a special coverage under most state laws, and including under Virginia, for certain respiratory illnesses, of course, and certain heart diseases, and for a certain number of cancers are actually presumed to be occupationally related if you can check other boxes in the system. And I find that work incredibly rewarding. And so that's how I came to be. And it's the old saying is, you go where your clients take you, is certainly true, because in 1985, I got married. The second thing I did was left the law firm I was at and started my own practice. And I actually started it with the idea that out of necessity, I would have to broaden my horizon of practice. But very quickly, I realized my waiting room was full of workers' compensation clients. And so I do nothing but workers' compensation. I get third-party cases all the time. So, for example, if you were driving a UPS truck and you were involved in a motor vehicle accident due to some other motorist negligence, I would represent you on the workers' compensation case against UPS, and I would bring in co-counsel to represent you on the liability case against the third-party driver. So it gives me the opportunity to really focus. I have a staff of 4 full-time employees, and I'm a sole practitioner. So that gives you some idea of the volume of cases that I handle. I probably try anywhere between 12 to 18 hearings a month. The hearings are relatively summary, that most of them last an hour. Certainly I have cases that have gone on for a couple days. Those are certainly the aberration rather than the norm. Given COVID, what's remarkable is the Virginia Workers' Comp Commission, shout out to them. They are the most technologically advanced commission in the country, or one of them. And everything has been on web file, which is their system. Everything is done paperless now. All our opinions, all our evidence gets submitted ahead of time. And of course, since COVID, they were particularly well positioned to move right into the WebEx hearings which is what we've done. Last summer, we opened up again for live hearings, and then our governor shut those hearings down, and so we're back doing WebEx hearings, and I find them to be actually very good. It's either live with a mask or WebEx without a mask. And so people say, well, how do you judge credibility of a witness? Well, I don't know how you judge them with a mask anyway. So I think credibility is best determined by listening and looking at people. And I think you can do that just as well on WebEx versus live with a mask. So that's the way our commission has been opting. Every one of our cases, and I guess most lawyers that do what I do, and I saw your previous episode, and I very, very much enjoyed that with a personal injury lawyer.
Yeah, that's Aaron Hicks.
Yes,
hey, Aaron.
That's excellent. So we personal injury lawyers or workers' comp lawyers, we're all frustrated doctors. So we learn, you have to learn, as a matter of necessity, a lot about medicine. And I would say, other than being a doctor, and there's certainly a lot of areas of medicine that I know more about than some general practitioners do, as you might imagine, the vast majority of our work deals with orthopedics, neurosurgery, and such, giving work injuries. But I've got a number of cases dealing with endocrinology. I have a firefighter who had a very serious pulmonary injury, and as a result of that, developed diabetes. And so we had to establish the causal relationship of his diabetes to his pulmonary injury. Same with the cardiology cases, and the cancer cases. In fact, I had a fascinating ovarian cancer case this year. There's some very recent studies out on ovarian cancer that actually says that most ovarian cancers actually begin as fallopian tube cancers, and there's some massive advances in pathology where they're able to discern that. The significance medically is that women who are prone to fallopian tube cancer can frequently have, ovarian cancer can have their fallopian tubes taken out and not suffer post-surgical menopause. The thing legally, the reason that became important is that was the basis of a defense to a case where there is a presumption to ovarian cancer, but there's not a presumption from fallopian tube cancer. And the pathology reports came back and indicated this was primarily a primary fallopian tube cancer originating. So that type of interaction with medicine has always been fascinating to me. I enjoy it. I have a lot of good friends that are doctors who refer cases to me. We work interchangeably. And so that's sort of, I have an office here where I've got, I'm a hunter, I'm a fisherman. I bring my firefighter clients in here. I like shaking hands with people. I like talking eye to eye to them. I miss all that. I'm looking forward to getting back to that. But I mean, we're doing the best we can with the circumstances we have now. And our commission has been extremely excellent in keeping the glaciers of cases moving, because the number of cases and the number of injured workers is really incredible. When you think about someone having got hurt in February of last year, and then the hearings all got suspended, you wonder how they got by on any income until their case could be adjudicated. And the commission started hearing cases almost, I don't think there was more than a week or so, they started having hearings online. And so they've been very adept at keeping this all moving. And so that's what brought me to do this kind of practice. I love representing real people. I think I make a real difference in real people's lives, rather than representing some sort of obscure, not that I'm an anti-corporation guy or anything like that, but I like representing real people where I'm making a real impact in their lives. And so that's what brought me to do what I do. I love what I do. I'm 64 years old. A lot of my colleagues are like, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, no time soon. The Lord will, and the river don't rise. I mean, I love what I do. My wife's my office manager, so I get to see her more frequently, and it works out very well.
Oh, I'm so glad. It sounds like you have had a wonderfully compelling and exciting and very personal journey to the law. And law and medicine connected. That is definitely how I got here, and I can definitely understand that. But I'm so glad that you're here and that you're a person doing the things that you do for the injured workers. I have family members, part of UPS. These things come up, so it's good that there's somebody out there like you willing to help the people that need help.
Well, thank you. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I find it very personally gratifying. I just won very emotionally significant PTSD case from a firefighter from one of the local jurisdictions. Cases are very difficult to win under current Virginia law. There was an amendment last July 1st that makes it a little easier, but this case unfortunately fell under the old law. But it's very gratifying to help someone out like that. These true day-to-day heroes who suffer incredible psychic injuries that, and this guy was a tough guy. This guy was a former college football player too, and he was just emotionally a broken individual. And now all his medical care will be paid for. Now he's covered for it for the rest of his life, and he'll get whatever state-of-the-art treatment he needs, which he needs a lot. These people who suffer from PTSD in a legitimate sense, they suffer. I've had a lot of physical injuries, and I've certainly had deaths and things like that in the family. But that psychic injury that just doesn't go away is one that I think we know from our veterans claims and things like that. By the way, I handle one case a year for the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Appeals, which is a intermediate court that Ronald Reagan signed into a place from which you can appeal from the Veterans Board. I handle one case. They're pro se. We don't charge for that. I handle one case a year for those and get to argue in United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Appeals, which again, very gratifying court. I won a case where a guy got retroactive benefits all the way back to Vietnam, and it was a lot of money for a guy that unfortunately his social worker had to go out and find him to tell him he won because he was living under an overpass down in Houston, Texas. So, like I said, I like representing real people in circumstances that I can do some real good for them, and there are a lot of people. Firefighters, I love firefighters. Firefighters are the most heroic people. Well, police officers do. Don't get me wrong. But firefighters are so heroic, and unfortunately, they're somewhat kept in the dark by their local jurisdictions regarding their rights under the workers' compensation laws. I don't know if they think they're saving money or what they're doing, but they really get taken advantage of, and it's always been sort of my Don Quixote in me going after those different municipalities for those cases, because a lot of attorneys won't take them. They're complicated. They're not particularly lucrative, but I just find them so gratifying from a personal standpoint.
Well, and like I said, I'm so glad there's someone who does what you do for those people in need. And I just wanted to ask you, it sounds like you really like that connection between law and the medicine. And I'm just trying to see when those medical records come up, it sounds like you do a lot of those summaries and reviews yourself.
Yeah, I screen every one of my cases personally. My staff is not allowed to tell somebody I'm going to represent them. In fact, until COVID came, I had a strict rule. Of course, I've been doing this 39 years. I always said, I'm coming up on my 4th anniversary in June. I always said, no one can hire me except with a handshake and look at me in the eye in my office. And that was particularly because we have such an affirmative ethical obligation to make sure that the client understands when the attorney-client relationship exists, and just as importantly, when it does not exist. So I don't want an email from somebody and I answer a question and they think that establishes an attorney-client relationship. Obviously, I've had to bend that rule with COVID because for protecting my staff, we were not having live clients in the office, but I was doing it on Zoom and other platforms and doing it over the internet. Excuse me, signing retainers over the internet, that kind of thing. But that's one of the reasons. But I miss that interaction, the personal interaction directly. I certainly enjoy it by phone and by WebEx. But I look forward to the day that we're back in the live courtrooms.
All right.
And yes, the medicine is fascinating to me. It really, it's amazing because doing what I do, I get to know the medical community extremely well, not only by name and such, but actually by reputation based on who is routinely getting their folks better. Because that's what I see from my catbird seat. I see, hundreds of cases with different orthopedics, and they might all be the same type of injury, but yet you see trends in different treatment from different orthopedics, who's routinely getting really good outcomes, et cetera. So I have a lot of doctors that call me, surgeon called me. His wife has a really bad tennis elbow, and he said, she needs a transposition of the ulnar nerve. Who would you go to? And I gave him a name, and he said, thanks. I said, with someone that does 200 a year,
You're a referral person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and I know you do a lot. You're doing all of those things yourself. I'm just trying to see if there's anything in those medical records that you find most difficult or anxiety producing or frustrating when you're dealing with those records on your own.
Well, what I do have my staff assist me with, and that is getting to the meat of the records. Mm-hmm. You certainly know this doing what you do. If you have a client that's been admitted to a major trauma center and you request their medical records, probably some in the neighborhood of 95% of that is going to be unnecessary for what I need in the case. Mm. I mean, if I could just get the admission summary and the discharge summary and maybe the operative notes, that would be good. Unfortunately, trying to get that nowadays, I find to be difficult. It's easier to get it because it's medical. I mean, it's electronic. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you get a lot more volume of things that you really don't need. Yeah. So it's filtering through and getting what you need. And I think you and I had talked earlier. I think one of the biggest points I would make for new lawyers or any lawyer, and I do this because I've never had a fallopian tube cancer case before. Mm-hmm. But what you need to do is become substantively knowledgeable with that particular medical area, so that one, you can understand it. Secondly, so that you can make the judge understand it, because it's going to be that judge that's either ruling for you or against you. And if you can't inform the judge in such a way that they can make a decision that's favorable to your client, then that's your fault as a lawyer, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So it is important to have a substantive working knowledge. You don't have to know it as well as a oncologist would know it, mm-hmm. but you have to know the right questions to ask the oncologist, and you have to have the right substantive law basis so that you ask the right questions. I frequently get questions like interrogatories to physicians from a defense attorney, where they'll say something, for example, well, you can't say that that's related beyond any doubt, can you? And the doctor will say, no, I can't say that. And I'll write them a letter saying, is it your opinion to a reasonable degree of medical probability that this incident contributed at least to some degree? And they'll say, well, yeah, I win that case because I asked the right question and I know what the legal standard is, and I only need him to give me what I need to win. I don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt if all I need to do is prove it by a preponderance of the evidence. And in Virginia, all I have to prove is, in a comp case, that the accident contributed to some degree. So I had a case once where, I hate to tell war stories, but I had a case where a woman had, I think she had 6 or 8 prior knee surgeries. And her doctor said as soon as her diabetes was under control, they were going to replace her knee. Well, she was a highly compensated administrative person at one of the local hospitals. And they had a meeting, and that had nothing to do with her, but it was a meeting she attended. And she went to sit down on one of the chairs, and one of the wheels had come off the chair, and the chair tipped over, and she fell on that injured knee. And her doctor looked at it and said, we can't wait anymore. We got to do it now. Mm-hmm. So they replaced her knee, and of course, the workers' comp defense attorney said, well, wait a minute, she needed this anyway. And I go, doctor, did it aggravate, accelerate, or exacerbate the underlying condition? And he said, of course it did. Mm-hmm. I won the case. They had to pay for the total knee. So it's a matter of knowing what legally you need, and then knowing enough about the medicine to be able to ask the doctor an intelligible question. The doctors are smart guys, but they also speak medicalese, not legalese. So it's the lawyer's job, in my opinion, to get them over on our side, take your medical knowledge and put it in the terms that I need. Mm-hmm. Because to a lot of doctors, they'll say, well, it's possibly related. And then when I get them on the phone, they'll go, I can say probably. And I go, well, you know how much of a difference there is between possibly, which is viewed as conjectural, or probably, which is enough to sustain, the burden of proof in a preponderance case. And they're like, okay, well, I can say that. So it is a matter of knowing enough about the medicine to ask the right question.
Well, it sounds like getting the medical professionals and the legal professionals on the same page is important.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, Virginia, so for all workers' compensation law, there's only two ways you can recover, 2 theories. One is injury by accident, which is pretty easy to define. It's like a specific identifiable incident that occurs at a particular moment in time that causes a sudden mechanical change. I always say to my firefighters, not to insult their intelligence, but I said, think of it like a snap, crackle, or pop. You got to have something like that. The only other way it's covered is what's called an occupational disease. Now, repetitious overuse syndromes are not currently covered under Virginia law. So if I get someone with a rotator cuff injury because he's pulling a rope all day for 3 hours, that's not covered. On the other hand, if while he's pulling that rope, he feels something snap in his shoulder, and that's the history he provides to the doctor, then I can win that case as an injury by accident. So part of my job, I believe, when I deal with physicians, is to say, you know how important your history is, Doc? And in fact, a lot of times doctors will, and you've probably seen this 100 times, I've certainly seen it more than that, they'll say no evidence of trauma. Well, then you say to the doctor, what do you mean by trauma? He goes, well, I mean by trauma like, falling down the steps or getting in a car crash. I go, well, how about when he lifted that box and he felt the sudden sharp pain in his back? And he goes, well, I don't really think of that as a trauma. And I go, okay, but it's an injury by accident. So a lot of times when a physician writes no evidence of trauma, defense attorneys will jump on that and say, see, there wasn't an accident. It was a gradually incurred injury. And you got to get in there and work the doc a little bit to make sure, that they're recording the history that goes in line with what Virginia law requires. And certainly there are a number of orthopedists, as you guess, that I deal with all the time. And they know the drill. They've been through this. I always tell orthopedists, they'll go complain, I don't want to do this legal thing. And I said, well, then you should have been a dermatologist. Because if you're an orthopedist, you're either going to be doing sports-related injuries, workers' comp injuries, or car crashes, or you're going to have nothing but geriatric patients. So, pick and choose what you want, Doc. But if you're a board-certified orthopedist in this area, a third of your work is going to be legal work. Right? I mean, yeah. It's probably the same where you are. I mean,
well,
I want to get off base. Would you refocus me on your questions?
I think you have given us a lot to chew on, for sure. And it sounds like you are definitely enjoying what you do. You're helping those that need help, and you're working for real people that need real compensation. And it's important that when you need an attorney, that you get to the right one for those workers' comp injuries. Sounds like you're the person to go to.
Well, thank you. And let me tell you, I am the first one to recognize my limitations in the practice of law. I take nothing but Virginia workers' compensation cases. I get people all the time say, yeah, but you did a great job on that. I want you to handle my car crash. I go, no, I don't do that every day. I don't know the nuances to that. I don't know the judges. I don't know the predilections of the juries in that venue. Why do you want me? Why don't you want a guy, just like an orthopedist, if I was getting my shoulder replaced, I want the guy that's doing $200 a year, not the guy that, not the dabbler. So I avoid dabbling. I think when lawyers get into dabbling, they run afoul of their obligation to act competently for the best interest of their client. And I just don't do it. And some people get turned off by that. Can you write a will? How hard's that? Well, it's pretty hard, actually, and I don't do it. So let me refer you to a trust and estates lawyer. So I have a big network of lawyers who send me workers' comp because, by the same token, a lot of lawyers will get a workers' comp case and they'll think, gee, how hard can that be? And they get about waist deep in the water, and they realize that there's, predators in the water, and then they're calling for help. And then after that, they just refer the case to you because it's not a type of practice that you want to take the case here and there. It's really something like criminal or tax. You kind of got to devote yourself to it. If you think about our Court of Appeals, which is our intermediate court, 1/3 of their entire docket is workers' compensation law. And that's an incredible caseload. The industry in Virginia is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry as far as all the medical treatment and lost wages and things like that. And of course, you probably know this, I've been practicing almost 40 years. The cost of medical care has far outpaced any other cost on a workers' compensation case. So we're frequently called upon experts to give us opinions regarding future medical care projections. Because workers' comp provides lifetime medical care, provided it's still related to the accident and with an authorized doctor. So, again, going back to your medical knowledge, you know that if a guy has an ACL tear, he's got about an 80% chance he's got a meniscal tear to go with it, which means if he has both of those done, he's probably got about a 20 or 30% chance of needing a total knee replacement at some point in his life. And if I can go back and prove, doctors, that your opinion to a reasonable degree of medical probability that ACL and meniscal tear contributed to some degree to this guy's need for a total knee, guess what they usually say? They say, of course it did. How could that not play some part? And that's all it has to play, some part. And so when attorneys who don't handle those cases, they settle those cases for a small amount of money. And I go, did you get a medical cost projection? Did you find out what a total knee costs these days? Have you considered what a total knee is going to cost 20 years from now? Because I don't think they're getting cheaper. So there's a lot that goes into it. And so that's why I say I frown at dabblers. I welcome the opportunity to mentor young lawyers, and I do that freely. Call me if you got a question. I'm glad to walk you through it, because there's so many pitfalls in what we do. It's really like crossing through a minefield at night, and if you don't know where the mines are, you're probably going to step on one and blow your leg off. And that's where lawyers get into trouble, in my opinion, a lot of times. The only other business I get into at all is I testify as an expert witness in Virginia workers' compensation matters. Unfortunately, those are usually in legal malpractice cases. And almost invariably, they are dabblers who are handling a workers' compensation case over which they have no knowledge of its value, and they either blow the statute or they impair the carrier's right of subrogation or something else that kills the workers' compensation case legally. And then their client talks to another lawyer and says, well, gee, that was a couple $100,000 case. And now that lawyer is bearing the burden of being sued because he shouldn't have taken that case in the first instance. But again, I don't mean to go so far afield from what you'd asked.
No, it sounds like good advice, good direct advice, the right attorney for the right type of case to get the best result.
Well, I mean, isn't that true in your medical profession?
Oh,
I mean, don't you want the heart valve doctor that's doing 1,000 of these a year and practices on cadavers on his day off?
Yeah.
I mean, exactly, right?
I understand. Oh, and Jim, thank you. I appreciate your and you've given good advice. You've given good information, and I'm going to check and see if anybody out there has any questions for Jim about his career, his practice. And if you do, please take time to get that ready and post it in the comments. And before we do that, I have to let you know a little bit of something, a little commercial break, so to speak. Here at Wade Nurse Consultants, it looks like Jim mentioned, having cost projections for cases like workman's comp, or it could be personal injury, could be helpful in knowing what your damages might be. And at Wade Nurse Consultants, we do have those life care plans available after a person's had an injury and they're having their case and they're seeking damages. A life care plan can help project those future costs, those medical costs that are always elevating, as Jim says, definitely so. If there are any adaptations to a home that are going to be needed, projections for medication costs, projections for other medical specialist visits, all of those can be included in a life care plan. So if life care plans is something that comes up that you may need, just type the word care plan into the comments and we will reach out to you and give you a free 15-minute life care plan strategy call. So I'm going to give you just reach out to my email, lisa@wadenurseconsultants.com. I'm also including Jim's contact information in the description section of this YouTube channel. Visit there, like us, subscribe, and check out Jim's contact information and reach out to him in Virginia when you have those workers' compensation questions. And now on to any questions in the comments for you today, Jim. And if we don't have anybody live with those questions, feel free on the replay to, in the comments, put your questions in there and we will get them to Jim and get an answer for you. How's that sound, Jim?
Absolutely. Happy to do it. Happy to do it.
Oh, I'm so...
And just tell me, I want to reiterate how valuable the service that you offer is
for
lawyers for doing life care plans, because, you know, how many times am I faced with a client that comes to my office who has said, you know, I've had this knee injury. Now, remember, you win a workers' compensation case in Virginia, that's lifetime medical benefits for that injury. So there's, other than guessing, which I'm not a guesser, I want someone that backs me up professionally, that tells me what is the estimate for this person's life care plan for that injury, for their estimated life. We can do rated ages, we can talk about all that, but I need numbers, and I need to be able to have due diligence to show that I've made an effort to ascertain those numbers accurately, that I just pull something out of the air and go to the client and say, here's what we came up with. Now, what I have found since I've been doing that is I'm getting much higher recoveries on my cases, but it also gives me the reassurance that if there was ever a question about the reasonableness of that outcome, I would have in my file documentation to establish where I came up with those numbers. And of course, I get the client's permission ahead of time. I usually advance the cost. They're very happy with it. And then when we settle the case, we recover the cost back out of the settlement. But it's an invaluable service, and I would encourage all your followers to consider that, because I think a lawyer that doesn't do that is really playing with fire, particularly on these complicated cases. But really any case, even a medial meniscectomy, like I said, what's the likelihood of having an additional revision? What's the likelihood of having a total knee, et cetera? Because I see them, you know, I always tell my firefighter clients, having been a Division I college athlete, I always tell them, you guys are like athletes. It's not a matter of whether you're hurt. It's a matter of whether you're so hurt that you can't play. And they literally live from injury to injury. You know, firefighters have a significantly reduced life expectancy due to all the insidious carcinogens to which they're exposed as a result of, you know, the products of combustion, et cetera. And also, you've probably seen the studies about going from 0 to 100 miles an hour with your adrenaline repeatedly over years leads to heart disease and other illnesses. And that's, you know, you take a firefighter, and I get a guy that comes to my office that's 55 years old, and I look at him, I go, you look like you're 70. They have a hard life. They have a hard life, man. They're heroic people, man. We need to really give them the, you know, that a boy. Anytime I get a chance, I'm in Starbucks or something like that, man, no one else is buying coffee for them. I'm doing it, and I thank them every day.
Oh, well, we all thank them for their service, and we thank you for being here with us today. Jim, are you going to come back again?
Absolutely. It's absolutely my privilege, and I'm sorry I didn't have the technological part figured out.
Oh, we'll get that. That's easily learned. Don't.
That's in my ugly face anyway.
Don't worry yourself. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions for you now, but if we get any questions and comments on the replay, I'll get those to you. And like I said, Jim's contact information is going to be right in the description section of this YouTube channel. And just look him up, come and feel free to ask him anything that's on your mind about workers' comp. And it looks like we're getting ready to wind up for today. Thank you again, Jim. And we're going to see you on another time this year if you're ready.
Absolutely.
All right. So
my privilege. Thank you very much, Ms. Wade. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. We're gonna wrangle these technical issues the next time, and we'll get to see your handsome face.
Yeah, there you go. You'll be disappointed, I'm sure.
Oh, I think not. Well, in the meantime, let me tell everyone that's out there or that's a part of our attorney medical record resource group, keep your questions coming in about any medical records that come up, any definitions, you need abbreviation definitions, feel free to drop it in the chat at our Attorney Medical Record Resource Group. And that's our connection to our LinkedIn group. Please visit us, see if it's someplace you'd like to join, and keep all of those questions coming in. And we'll catch you next time on next week, hopefully with less technical difficulties, on another episode of Should You Take That Case? Thank you.